Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Weekend Warrior podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Sandoval, with Dr. Robert Clapper. Thank you for joining us. It's always entertaining when we tape these on Monday. It's also somewhat sad to see some of these injuries, and you think about the late, great Kobe Bryant tearing his Achilles tendon and the mental strain that caused on him. And then the season started, and Aaron Rodgers and the mental strain that started on him. And here, Kirk Cousins. And finally, when I was in Dallas Sunday, and I was looking at the statistics, and Kirk Cousins before this injury was like third in passer rating, even though that they weren't having a great year. They were turning the ball over in other places, but he was having a terrific year. He tore his ACL, Achilles tendon, not his ACL. And it's just deflating. But in talking to you and in my time knowing you, it's not what it used to be back in the day.
It's such an exciting time for us in orthopedic surgery because this injury, and let's just go directly to the anatomy. So here's the calf muscle, the gastroc muscle, the medial and the lateral head, and you can feel on your own body the back of your calf. Deep to it is another muscle called the soleus that gives the width of the calf muscle, and they coalesce, come together to form this fascia, this fibrous band, like canvas-like material, and then it solidifies and becomes a rope, if you will. That's the Achilles tendon attaching to the heel bone. They always tear in the same spot because of the blood supply. It's about an inch above the heel, the back of your heel bone, called the calcaneus. They rupture in that same spot. And traditionally, we have fixed these very successfully. People coming back to play, Kobe Bryant came back to play, by putting stitches, tendon, and sewing them together. But there are two beautiful advances in our modern world that we have now that allows us, as you saw, Aaron Rodgers 2 months after his surgery, he's on the sidelines
throwing a football
with his back foot loading his Achilles tendon, not in a boot. And the reason is because they advanced two things. One, we no longer are sewing the two ends of the tendons and leaving it at that, protecting them in a boot and getting it to heal. The decision now is made, put the stitches into the tendon, but also, instead of just stopping by sewing it back to the other end of the rib tendon down below, anchor the stitches into the bone itself. Wow. So the back of the heel, the calcaneus, where this blue strip is, we put two drill holes and anchors, literally anchors into the bone so that the tendon is rigidly locked into the bone. That's the big first advance, is to think of it differently than we did before in terms of how to repair it. And the second thing is, when you use stitches, you have to tie a knot, which makes this bulging product, if you will. And if you feel the back of your Achilles tendon, there's skin and the tendon. There's not a lot of room for you to have a bulky bunch of knots and sutures. So the other big advance we have now is we can lock the stitches without tying a knot.
Wow.
So it's flat, so it's not rubbing, not irritating. Those two advances, bolting the tendon back into the bone and using sutures that are bulletproof material like Kevlar, called fiber wire, without knots, so it doesn't rub. This is why, thanks to Aaron Rodgers, who's really pushing the needle for us in terms of recovery and will inspire every other football player that tears their Achilles tendon going forward.
You mentioned something just right there that you had brought up when we were discussing Aaron Rodgers. The stitches themselves are of a Kevlar, and that's a pretty significant change in terms of the rehabilitation and how quickly they can come back, yes?
Yes, because you always protected patients traditionally from rotator cuffs, from biceps, whatever tendons that rupture, quadriceps that we're fixing. We always worried, could you fire the muscle and rip through the tendon itself because the material was weak? Now we have sutures made of material that you can't break with your own hands. So that worry is not there.
One of the things I love about this show that you've demonstrated for us is the process, the Clapper visions of understanding. But the other part of it, quite frankly, that I enjoy is for you, the viewer, the listener, preventative medicine.
Yes.
And I come from a family, Dad was an athletic director, Mom was a nurse. Mom always taught us RICE, rest, ice, compress, elevate. When I, back in my marathon days, I had a little plantar fasciitis at one small point, and they were explaining how this goes to here and comes up here.
Correct.
And in the diagram that they showed me at my rehab place, they said anything that's white means there's less blood flow. And they said, think about it. As we tape, I'm standing up. And what's controlling the blood flow is your heart, right?
Yes.
And so it's harder to get blood flow down in the bottom of your foot where your plantar fasciitis is. Is there something that a weekend warrior, if Dr. Clapper, if they said, my Achilles seems tight, I mean, should they lay on their back with their foot up to get more blood flow? What else can people do so they are not Kirk Cousins and rip this thing?
There's a lot of variables. First of all, age. If you critically look at the bell-shaped curve, we don't see 18-year-olds coming with torn Achilles tendons. It occurs because a bell-shaped curve means there's a couple of 18-year-olds, and we really don't see it in the 60-year-olds. We see it, where's the peak, where they all seem to congregate? 35 years old, thank you very much.
Really?
So 32 to 37 years old, and you'd have to look at the age of Aaron Rodgers, of Kobe Bryant, of Kirk Cousins. And why is that?
Can I guess?
Yes.
Can I guess?
Yes.
Why at the top?
Yeah.
Because their Achilles is older, but so it's getting thinner or not as strong. But they still think they're the 18-year-old.
Well,
is that close?
That's close.
Or
but
performing like an 18-year-old.
Yes, but you have the Clapper vision is you still have a 68 Nova that you're driving, and it's not a Prius, okay? So it's going to rattle a lot louder when it hits the pothole. But here's the best Clapper vision. I'm 66 years old, pinch the back of my hand. We can wait for a half an hour for my skin to flatten. You take an 18-year-old, Eli, and pinch the back of his hand, snap, instantaneously. The aging process that leads to cataracts, heart valves calcify, my skin is like this. It's as if you took my bungee cord and left it out in my truck in the sunlight for 66 years versus the bungee cord that's right out of the package, which is elastic. Drying out means you can do all the stretches you want. But when you're 50 and you're doing stretches, I'm telling you, the collagen is not elastic anymore. That bungee cord is not, it may elongate, but don't confuse elongation with elasticity.
Okay, expand on that. Elongation versus elasticity.
So the same stretching exercise that the trainer tells a 60-year-old, come on, touch your toes, do calf planks or whatever they want to call that. You may be getting the range of motion, but you're tearing very brittle collagen fibers in a 60-year-old. You're tearing the brittle fibers versus the 20-year-old who's doing calf raises and touching their toes. Their bungee cord is elastic. They both look like they have the same range of motion, but one is ripping tendon, the other is stretching tendon.
So let's take that a step farther. If I were to know a almost 60-year-old who wants to keep running, I
would give you my card and say that you're pre-op.
But I don't want to be pre-op. And I know there's people out there. I want to keep running the marathons. Is there any preventative thing, or do you just say, Sandoval, quit running marathons, get on the elliptical?
My wife says I never answer the question, so here I'm going to answer the question. We've all been in our car with that jogger, we're at the red light, who is running in the bike path.
Right.
He's overweight, His arms are flailing. His belly is enormous because once he's done running, he's convinced himself he burned 400 calories, so he's going to eat 2 bags of potato chips. I mean,
instead of one.
His technique of how heel strike, mid stance, toe off, how he lands as each step of his run is catastrophic to the discs in his back, to his muscle, versus the Kurt Sandoval, who knows technique, who is graceful like a gazelle, like an impala, and has beautiful form, who gets to be bell-shaped curve. That we all want to be on that side of the bell-shaped curve. We may genetically not be able to be there, but we all want to think that we're there. And so that is why the kinds of socks you wear, the kinds of shoes. Remember John Wooden?
Yeah.
How he tormented his... These are McDonald's All-Americans before there was a McDonald's or an All-American. But these were the greatest basketball players in the country. Bill Walton would be the first one to tell you. He would basically say, good, you're not in high school anymore. You're in my gym, and I'm your coach, and I need to teach you how to put your shoes and socks on. Again, John Wooden ahead of the curve. It has nothing to do with the shoes and socks.
Yeah.
It's his point was, I need to teach you fundamental. And I don't mean bounce pass.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even know how to put your shoes and socks on.
Life fundamental. You know, it's interesting. One of the things I'm so grateful for this platform because I grew up running. My dad was a cross-country coach. My brother was an All-American cross-country runner. Wow. He was incredible. And, you know, the Geico commercials now, don't be your parents, you know? I'm that guy, when you brought up seeing the runner, I'm that guy that will pull up next to someone who's running on concrete. And I'm like, just get on the asphalt. Right. Just get on the asphalt. Right. As, you know, I always thought, no, I'll defy the odds. I'll be that guy still running in my 70s, and I don't run that much anymore. Right. Because it's not the age of the car, it is the miles on the car. And when I was young, I put a lot of miles on the car. But the one thing I would tell all the runners out there, if you can still run, great for you. Yeah. But there's also hiking. And hiking is a dirt trail, and you're going up a mountain, so you're getting the same cardiovascular. You're usually up above in altitude somewhere, so you're getting those benefits. But it really is, it's like layers of an onion. Yes. That you're how about that Sandoval Clapper vision?
Sandal vision.
No one's better than the Clapper vision than Dr. Robert Clapper. But it is layers of an onion of technique, socks, shoes, don't run on concrete, proper form. You see too many people going side to side instead of running. It's all of the above.
You know, in final, I mean, I'm not here to say stop exercising. You're killing yourself, except kind of. But everybody listening wants to know, well, where am I on the bell-shaped curve? Am I that guy you just said has beautiful technique who can run into his 90s? Or am I the guy where? And here, so I don't want to leave you hanging. It isn't what supplement should I take to beat the system, or what surgery can I do to a Little League elbow so they can pitch with Tommy John where the Little League father actually thinks you become stronger. So it's not surgery, it's not a supplement. Here's what I would tell you. We've been given from up above the greatest feedback of how we're doing. And each of us have it individually. Pain. The 4-letter word that I love. Not because I'm a surgeon and I like fixing people with a knife. No, I like to write books about here's what you can do not to need surgery. Heal your hips, heal your knees. These are books I've written. But the key, which I love, is pain. Your next door neighbor can do whatever the hell they want in terms of run forever and be in shape and eat whatever they want. But if you have pain, I don't like no pain, no gain. Mm-hmm. If it hurts when you do this, then ride the bike. Mm-hmm. If you can, as you say, take up hiking up a mountain because the terrain is different and you can do it with no pain, I'd rather you do that than say no pain, no gain and force your body to do something that it's telling you it doesn't want you to do. And that's the uniqueness. We each have a different pain threshold.
I love that. And to recognize what you said there is individually.
Yes.
Individually. I've had pain where, okay, I'm tired, my legs have a lot of lactic acid. There's also a pain that I had a couple years ago where it's like I couldn't even get on an elliptical because I was biomechanically
Right.
not in line.
Correct.
So it's recognizing and it's that self-awareness. I love that we took Kirk Cousins and took a negative to him and spun it to a positive to the weekend warriors out there.
Yes.
To self-evaluate, to think about these things. Because at the end of the day, everyone who's a weekend warrior, whatever, if you're playing football, basketball, baseball, golf, shooting hoops, whatever, you just want to keep going.
Yep.
You want to do it for as long as you humanly can because it doesn't just help the body physically, it helps it between the ears.
Correct. Agree.
All right. Until next time, thank you very much. Have a great week. We look forward to your stories next week, Dr. Clapper.
Thank you, Kurt.
Hey, guys, thanks for listening to the Weekend Warrior podcast. Wherever you're listening or watching, click on the link, and we're going to take questions again next week.
Great.
So send wherever you're listening to, send us a question, and we look forward to talking to you next time on the Weekend Warrior podcast.